Hi and welcome along to the Gers TV. I've got a special guest today, Ross K.C. How you doing, mate?
Great, fantastic, great to be here.
So I've got a Doug here as well, so you might hear her
I
making
can
some
hear her.
noises.
She's lovely.
And if she jumps up, just knock her back down again. Tommy, I've introduced you as K.C. The only thing I will say about that is I know it's a fantastic honour for you to have that. But it always upsets me when I think it used to be Thomas Ross K.C.
It was.
Majesty the Queen.
But luckily, I was appointed by Queen Elizabeth II in 2017, so I was very, very happy, and I probably got much more affection for her, to be honest.
Yeah, so with that title, I'm going to talk to you about Rangers and a few things that we've got in common in a minute.
Sure.
But what like was that experience in meeting the Queen?
No, you don't. She signs a warrant, and you're given a copy of it, so I've got that framed.
So do you get that ceremony?
We almost, yeah, you do. You have a kind of legal ceremony, and then the idea is in time you get an invitation to Holyrood, and we were invited to Holyrood last year, but unfortunately my wife's mother died, so we weren't able to go. So hopefully the invitation will be repeated next year.
So you might get it again?
I think so.
And for anybody that's not sure, KC, QC, that means that you're part of the King's Council, Queen's Council.
Right.
Used to be.
You're one of now the King's Council in Scotland, but it's really a kind of honorary title for lawyers who have been experienced and shown themselves to be capable, I suppose.
So you're one of the top men?
Well, maybe, aye.
Well, that's the thing about it. So you studied that. You obviously want to go to the top of your profession.
Yeah,
you go there.
Absolutely.
Did you ever think you were going to get that to that level?
I thought probably, in time, but there's a lot of, it's the kind of title you get maybe after 30 years in the job or something, 20 years in the job. So it's a long way to get there, and you need to be operating at the top level to have any chance of even being noticed for it. So it's quite a long journey to get there, but I was pretty confident in time that if I kept the head down and kept serious, that I would get there.
Is that the highest level you get for the profession? Then?
Really, I mean, some people go on to be judges, but I don't have any interest in that.
Aye, no, I wouldn't fancy that. And obviously, for anybody that's watching, that's not really sure of the legal system, I'm not going to bore anybody with it, but the most famous one in Scotland would have probably been the man that Donald Finlay.
Yeah. Aye, I work with Donald Finlay. Aye.
You don't hear much of him anymore. Is he still?
He's still working, aye. So today.
Still doing it. Aye,
still doing it. Aye.
He's not involved with football anymore. He was
the chairman of Cowdenbeath.
Cowdenbeath. I'm going to say Ross K.C.
For all I know, he might still be. I mean, until very recently he was. But I think they dropped out the league and they're possibly non-league now. So I don't know whether he kept the association. But no, he would go every week wherever we're playing, and he was very devoted to it.
So let's talk about football. Talk about growing up. You became a Rangers fan as a young man, young man. What's your first experiences and memories you can think of with Rangers?
Well, I checked. My first ever game was the 6th of August 1971. It was a pre-season friendly against Everton. That was a Friday night. They won 2-1. Derek Johnson get the 2 goals. Joe Royal get the Everton goal, and then they were playing Tottenham Hotspur on the Monday.
Right. And
it was Manny who took me to both games, and they won 1-0. Willie Johnson scored. But I don't really remember anything about those games. I know that I was there. I don't remember anything about the matches. The first game that I really remember was the Sporting Lisbon game on the way to Barcelona.
Aye. Was that a quarter final?
It was the second round. So it was October, and Rangers were 3-0 up at half time. I think it was Willie Johnson and Henderson. And then they conceded 2 goals in the second half. So at half time it looked as if it was plain sailing, and then Lisbon scored 2. And they then went abroad, and it was 4-3. And it was I think it might have been the first season with the away goals rule.
And they didn't know?
Didn't know. And they made them play penalties, and they got knocked out. So I went to my bed thinking that was it. They were knocked out.
So you actually thought they were it?
Aye, because it was the days before the internet.
There's no mobile phones.
They just come up at the end of the news or something and said that they had lost in penalties. And then the next morning I found out that Willie Waddle had gone in with the rule book. And
the guy I spoke to you about before we started here, Jimmy Roger, I'm sure that's who found out the rules.
Should have been.
I'm pretty sure
I think it was definitely somebody.
A journalist told them.
Willie Waddle.
So the fans went away, because I've never really thought about this before. The fans would have thought the game were out my arse.
Aye. Although I don't, back then, 71, I don't suppose there was that many fans going abroad, but I suppose there were a few.
Incredible.
So that was my, I never went to that many games that season, but probably from the following season, I was there almost every week. I was at the...
So where were you from? Were you living in Ibrox?
Well, I was born in Govan, but by the time I was going to the games, we had moved to Cardonald. But I was at Craigton Primary School, which is probably about a mile and a half.
Aye, 5 minutes from
Ibrox. So we were always, me and all my pals were always down there at the training and everything, you know. So it was kind of growing up, it was a big interest for us. And you know, by current standards, we were all going to the home games, I suppose, when we were kind of 9 and 10 without any adults, you know, because
this is the days of the lift there.
Aye, because we didn't stay that far. So, you know, first the games I was talking about, I was either with my auntie or my dad. But you know, within a couple of seasons, there was just a big team of us going every weekend.
Aye, and you would have got in for anybody, because a lot of kind of people might watch it and they think, what do you mean? If you wanted to get in the game, you'd have got in.
Aye.
It wasn't a case of you might get in, you would have got in.
I think the boys, they had a boys' gate. We used to go to the Brimlin Road, the Celtic end, and it was 5 pence to get in.
Right?
I think. And I was at the 1973 Cup final when I was only 9.
Is that the Telford Side schools? Is that the Centenary Cup?
And I was at the semi-final, which was Ayr United, and I don't even know if there was any adults with us there. You know, it seems incredible that I was only 9, you know, going to Hampden for the Celtic game. But remember there was.
It's funny you're saying this, because I was telling my daughter this, that the world's completely changed. It's kind of woke society. And I was explaining to her that when I was growing up watching Rangers in the early 80s, it would now be classed as, my parents would be classed as like child abuse, because they gave you an apple, a can of ginger, and you stood outside the pub. Well, sure, I had a pint, and then you went to the game and came back, and everybody just assumed you were going to be safe. But if you think about that now, 9-year-old going to a game yourself, that would probably be in the news going that was a child missing, but you wouldn't have been lost.
I know, it was a
different world.
Different world. I mean, the school was quite near near Ibrox, but the flats where I stayed were probably about 20 minutes walk or something, and there'd be 7 or 8 of us, would all be about 9, 10.
Loving the time of your life.
Walking along to the game. Actually, before we were allowed to go, we used to go and sit in the big hill at Bellhouston Park.
Aye.
And you could hear the fans cheering all the goals and stuff, you know.
So just on that era with Rangers, mid-70s, that would have been before the 80s. Yeah. Football's completely changed now. Completely. It's almost a different sport, different environment. Do you miss the old terracing and the way it used to be, or do you think it's better the way it's went?
I don't really miss the terracing. I quite like the comfort. But there is, I kind of prefer the old football, to be honest. I'm a bit kind of nostalgic for the 70s and 80s, you know, and it's all a bit kind of sanitised now. I'm not a big fan of the VAR, for example. I think they've kind of ruined it a bit.
If you had your way with that, would you just go back to what they've got in the 3rd division, 2nd, 1st division, or whatever?
Well, in Scotland, you know, you've either do away with it or you get decent officials who are able to make reasonable decisions, you know, and it's not just Rangers that are affected by it. You know, everybody complains about some.
I just don't like it. The thing I don't like is taking the enjoyment away from the goal.
Exactly.
Because no matter how clear the goal is, you still have in the back of your head that you think, is it a goal? Did I miss something? And then by the time you do celebrate it, that's gone. Yeah.
I mean, if they restricted it to factual decisions like offside and whether the ball's going over the line. They're now going to be back to a foul that might happen 60 yards for the goal, and everybody's waiting for 2 minutes to see if it's a goal.
And it's changed for the arm position where it was. Is it natural?
Nobody knows.
A lot of it, I think, was football's about supporters going to the pub or wherever they go to cafes after the game or whatever, and discussing the fact that even if the referee got it wrong, that was part of the day out, whereas that's all been taken away. Yeah. And in terms of the days as well, who would have been your hero as a Rangers player?
Well, first one was Colin Steen.
Probably still your hero then.
And I've met him a couple of times since. But he left actually, so they won the Cup Winners' Cup in '72. I think by the start of the following season he was away. But so by that point, it was Big Parlin, Derek Parlin, and Derek Johnson. And I was a big fan of wee Tommy McLean, who used to get slaughtered by the fans. But, you know, when you look back on it, the number of crosses that he put in for Big Derek Johnson, but he was never really a fan's favourite, which I never understood.
And ended up a good manager as well.
He was, he was ended up, I think he was a caretaker when Jock Wallace left at one stage.
For 3 weeks or something like that, could be right.
Great wee player. But they were all, I mean, it was a kind of settled team, more or less, from then till the late 70s, you know. And I think that was part of the problem. They all got old together. And by the time John Greig took over, they'd all been playing together for a good few years and probably were past their best a wee bit.
I've spoken about this quite a while, but I'm just slightly too young to remember it. But I can remember the back of my mind, the Greg Must-Go days. John Greig voted Rangers' greatest ever player, whether people agree with that or disagree for a different show. But he probably took the right job at the wrong time. In hindsight, I think it would have been better they never got it. What's your memories of him going from the player to the manager?
Well, they won the treble with him as the captain, and then I think Wallace went to Leicester possibly, and John Greig took over. It's a bit of a mystery as to why Jock Wallace left. And
he never ever came out and went public yet.
Never explained it. It was I don't know. Anyway, I mean, at the time it kind of made sense. I think Celtic had appointed Billy McNeill, and it made kind of sense. But looking back on it, it was a crazy decision, you know, for a big club like Rangers to give the manager's job to somebody who'd never been a manager. It didn't make any sense.
And he also went from being teammates to the boss,
and kept probably some of them too long. But things were changing. You know, it was a strange time, because up until then, everybody, you know, it was just local people who were coming through the kind of youth ranks and everything, or maybe they were signing guys for Hearts and so on. And football was changing a wee bit, so it probably would have been a difficult time, no matter who took the job on. And definitely a difficult time for him. And he did, you know, the first season did well in Europe. I think they got the quarterfinals of the European Cup.
Juventus and PSV.
And then beat the Cologne. And I think did no bad in the cups, but they were miles up in the league. They were miles up, you know. And it was a shame, because everybody loved him, but ultimately, you know, they were booing, you know, to get rid of him in the stands. So it's never nice to see that somebody's given so much to the club getting such a hard time.
And that was also the days of the stadium change, the old Ibrox to the new Ibrox. Can you remember the change on it?
I can remember
the Derry end and the. I've heard different debates with the Derry end being the Copeland and the Derry end being the Govan.
Well, I always thought it was the Copeland, and we tended to go to the Broomlin, but a couple of times the Copeland was a bit more dangerous. And you know, there would be fights in the Copeland, and people would throw bottles and stuff, and that was always a bit frightening.
And that was a regular thing in the football.
It was. I remember it was
crash helmets.
Playing Montrose in the League Cup, and it would be August, you know, and there was a massive. For some reason, we'd get brave and decided to go to the Copeland instead of the Broomlin Roads end. And there was a massive Barney. Who knows why they were fighting when they were playing?
They probably don't know.
Montrose, but the whole terrace was battling, and they were throwing bottles and cans and everything. I thought, I'm not going back there. So I was quite glad when everybody was sitting down and everything got a bit better behaved, you know.
So I mean, football had to change. Obviously, with Ibrox disaster and things like that. In general as well, football had to change and Ibrox changed. So where did you start to sit after that with the new Ibrox?
But then we were standing in the enclosure, so we
the last standing part of the stadium.
So we had kind of moved into the
East enclosure.
It would be the the East enclosure.
Because you got guys, if you remember as well, you used to be able to go the East enclosure and then move to the West enclosure.
I just went in the back.
When Rangers changed things. And I remember that you used to have the training bit at the back of the enclosure, where you could watch the players training. Right. It was like a gym.
Underneath the main stand.
I
know. In fact, actually, when I think about it, we were mainly in the West enclosure, just at the tunnel. And then the first time I ever had a season ticket was when Souness took over. Because up until then, you just
didn't need one.
And first season ticket I had was the Copeland.
Right,
that was the first season Souness was there, and I was there until we went into the 4th division, actually. And I just thought, a lot of the old guys will know the new. I'd always wanted to go to the main stand. And I thought a lot of these old guys will know to renew their season tickets to go and watch this.
And moved up.
And we're quite lucky. So we're in the kind of just put in front of the director's box now.
So you said Colin Stein was your favourite Rangers player. In terms of manager, who's your favourite manager you've seen? Walter,
And obviously Walter, but also I was a big fan of Advocaat. He was the first one where you could
very
see
tactical.
what he was doing. You know, you could change the game, and we signed him. Anybody signed made perfect sense. You know, he knew what he was doing, and
he get accused of having the Italian Dutch clique. I don't really know if that was ever true, but with cultures like it would be hard to.
I mean, I don't think he was necessarily a people person. I think he was quite a hard manager, but
he's probably a head case to be fair. But he was a great manager,
and he obviously had the money to bring in quality. You know, I mean, the idea of somebody like Arthur Newman would come to the Scottish League, who
I would say was probably Rangers in my lifetime. Rangers' best left back.
Oh,
he certainly had the quality. The other thing, I'm not going to depress you with talking about it, but the recent events of the Russell Martin era is the style of football that he tried to introduce was what Advocaat done. But what you're saying is right. It was a different type of player. If you've got the right players for it, and we had the right players, we outclassed Parma twice. Two different tournaments. 2 seasons in a row.
No, it was a good time because they were bringing in foreign players that you hadn't really, you know, necessarily seen so many.
The Dutch element.
He was bringing in quality players, you know. So
he was also very unlucky with the Michael Moles signing.
He was,
because Moles was fantastic, but the injury, he never really recovered from it.
I think he would have, if he'd stayed, he would have broke every record, wouldn't he, Moles?
I think so. And Giovanni Van Bronckhorst was probably his main guy. But he also gave if I'm right in saying this, he gave Barry Ferguson an opportunity at a very early age when most managers wouldn't have done that.
Made him a captain.
Grabbed Tam Russo.
I think. No, and I thought he was fantastic, but you know, to give the more recent managers their due, they weren't operating with players of that quality.
And possibly we might never do again.
Nah, unlikely. I mean,
because of the English Premiership market money.
I mean, Newman would be middle table Premier League now, and then $100,000 a week, wouldn't he? You know, so you guys are at your budget.
Incredible. Then it moves on a wee bit. We go to the kind of more modern era. Looking at Souness. That was massive. Souness coming to Rangers. I still remember the Souness because there was a Jock Wallace was my hero, still is. Jock Wallace probably wasn't really healthy when he was leaving Rangers, if you look back, and it was the right thing to do. Souness, where is the right manager? Maybe could I get Alex Ferguson? I've seen an article a day, some stuff on Follow about it. Who could they have got? But Souness was probably the right man at the right time. He was an angry young man playing for Scotland, and he was one of the best midfielders in Europe.
He was, and I once read that when he went in for Butcher, the 3 teams who were in for him were Rangers, Spurs, and Man United, and Rangers were offering him more money than the other 2. You know,
incredible.
And it's incredible when you look at the English Premier League these days.
And they probably done the same for Chris Woods.
Aye. And of course, the English teams weren't playing in Europe at the time.
So we had to draw.
A big advantage. So, I mean, again, he did a fantastic job, and he came in, you know, all guns blazing, but he did have quality players, and ultimately, I suppose that's what it comes down to over a league season.
He made Rangers professional again, and all aspects of the club, and he made us a big name. And obviously, with the European ban for English teams, Rangers were getting a bigger pick at the market. But at that time, he'd also had Walter Smith as an assistant.
Yeah.
Remember that I was still quite young, believe it or not. I didn't think at the time Walter Smith. I would never have thought Walter Smith would have been the manager of Rangers. I remember St Mirren when he first took over the St Mirren game, and I don't think if he'd have beat Aberdeen in the last game, would Walter have got the job? He probably wouldn't have.
Yeah.
But what a day that was, because that started an era where you said he's probably in our lifetime he would have been Rangers' most successful manager and the best.
Yeah. I mean, he did an incredible job, because when you're the assistant, no matter who you are, if you're the assistant and you're made up, the fans are a wee bit dubious of that, aren't they? You know, right away. And he was a quiet man, you know.
Well, if the internet had been about in the days, it'd have went on fire when he got the job.
Exactly. But he did a fantastic job. And I mean, that was one of the great days at Ibrox, because I had been at Motherwell the week before. And I think the way it worked out. At one stage, they'd almost won it because Aberdeen were losing or something. And it went from that to a draw is not good enough. You've got to go out and win it.
And they were a great Aberdeen
team. They were a great team. And so it was a big, big day. And then I think Tom Cowan broke his leg or something. And John Brown get injured. I mean, it was a real...
Mark Caitlin's ligaments went.
It's gutsy. It could have... You're right. If they were so far ahead, if they'd gone from that position to lose the last 2 league games...
They might not have got the job.
They probably wouldn't have got it.
And nine in a row wouldn't have happened.
Never happened. No.
Most of the present day Rangers history when they've been there.
So
it's incredible. But obviously when they came back a second time as well, Walter, the thing about that, I would say, in my opinion, and I'm going to speak about Gerrard in a minute with this as well, is I think he came back a better manager.
Yeah.
And he was more experienced, because in Europe I thought Walter let himself down a wee bit.
Yeah.
The first time, and the second time he probably didn't have the same quality of players, but he took us to Manchester. And that was just the original, what I can remember, parking the bus, they call it.
Yeah.
But Mourinho done it, and then the other managers in Europe, they started to copy his tact.
And what else could he do? I mean, he's playing teams who are much better, and the only way you can really
bigger budgets.
Aye. Be fair to him, I mean, he didn't have a great record in Europe. I was at some of the away games where they get demolished. But for part of it, they had the 3-4 rule, which, and he was ending up playing Davy Dodds in the team when he was a coach and all that. Because he didn't
I remember
have
Juventus. I'm trying to remember, was it Cleveland?
Cleveland gets sent off.
I was seeing no marking Del Piero. I mean, when you think back on it, we just got for Dundee United a couple of weeks before or whatever. It was Cleveland, and there was Gary Boland might have played that night as well.
Well, they would never played in the league, and then they would bring them in for the European games
because it had to. So you put it in context.
That was why you get rid of Chris Woods.
Aye, and they broke goal, which worked out in his favour, that one. But when you put it into context, Del Piero at the time was only a young boy. He didn't really know who he was. But that season, he became the player.
I think they won it, didn't they? They won it. Won the Champions League.
They beat us 5-1 in Italy and 4-1 in Ibrox.
It was 4 both games, and we scored maybe.
Goff scored earlier.
Goff scored, aye.
Was that a game?
Aye. I was there because the guy in front of us got shot with an air gun. I remember.
That right? Aye.
Juventus fans. I remember that more than the game. But I mean, they were a fantastic team, and Walter's getting in.
There was no shame in that.
One hand behind his back, having to play guys that didn't usually play because they were Scottish, But you're right. But I never really thought he prioritised it. I thought he realised the fans wanted to win the league, and and they were never going to win the European Cup. So
probably with the budget he had, it was the right decision to make. But when he came back, obviously we got the road to Manchester and things like that. I thought his tactical knowledge then was just so much better.
Aye, I thought of him the other week. When Rangers beat the Czech team 3-0, and then they had to go for the second leg, and they played 4 forwards. I thought,
But with Watford, I thought that's the thing you've got.
He'd have not played any forwards, wouldn't he?
Aye, he'd have probably done the old part in the bus.
Aye,
but got his through.
3-0 up. Whereas I think they'd about 24 shots in goal. But if it hadn't been for the goalkeeper, they would have been out. So if you're playing teams that are better, it makes sense, doesn't it, to try and restrict their opportunities rather than get and try and score another 3 goals. It's just experience and talent, I suppose, and Walter had it, and that guy didn't.
Aye, and you've spoken about the fact that Rangers obviously been doing the divisions. They come back up. There's no much point talking about the days of depression all day. But in the present situation, because I'm trying to keep it down to about half an hour for the interview, more so because the Scotland game's on the night, we don't want to get caught in it.
Exactly.
And I'm not going to talk to you about Scotland. I don't play international football. But the big decision is going to be made, I think, the next 2 or 3 days, who the next manager of the Rangers will be. Now, one of the things I'm going to ask you about, because you've changed from being a young boy Rangers supporter to a lawyer and a KC. What's your opinion on the traditions when it comes to the suits and the way a Rangers manager should behave or be seen to be?
I was probably, to start off, if he'd been wearing a T-shirt and winning every week, I probably would have let it go. But I understand it's important to people. And my dad was at Ibrox Primary, and you saw when he was obviously a kid. So he used to see the players of that generation get into Ibrox for training. And back then, they had to wear a bowler hat.
Was that right?
Aye, and he used to talk about Tory Gillick. You must have read this somewhere. Tory Gillick was for the mining community. So he couldn't get in the morning with a bowler hat. So he used to go out with a bonnet.
Aye.
And then he would keep the bowler hat in a paper bag.
Swap it.
And then when he got off the subway, he would put it on.
I
So I was kind of brought up with stories with my dad about how the players have got to wear a suit to training and all that. And I like it, you know, and probably if you're trying to raise standards and get the message to the players that this is different from anywhere you've been before, it's a good signpost, you know.
And you'll never have that kind of pressure or expectations again at another club.
Because I mean, I think there is a danger if it's just the same as everywhere else. They get a real shock the minute they step into Ibrox and realise what they've got themselves into, because it's not just another team in blue. It's not, and you know the fans turn quite quickly if things are going bad. So you need to be a big character. So anything that kind of gives the message to the players, this is different from anything you've come up against before, is probably a good thing. And you know, maybe just having those standards again at this point when they really need a massive jolt to get them anywhere near back to anything half decent. Maybe big changes are needed just to get the message to the players, you know.
I mean, in terms of, I do remember actually, just now that you mentioned this, with Russell Martin, did you know defend him for being a vegan? Was that
well, I'm a vegan.
That's why I'm saying that.
And a bit of a Buddhist as well, so we were getting a terrible time, and I was saying, listen, you need to get rid of this guy because I'm getting a hard time now for being a vegan. He's giving vegans a bad name. And I was keen, I for a couple of weeks, I was saying, like, give the guy a chance. It's a hard job. He's had to get rid of 12 players, but I mean, ultimately,
it was never going to work at the end.
I mean, I've defended some difficult people, but I couldn't defend that. It was terrible,
well,
you know.
That would be a defensive job for you. So, but by the end of this, or the next day or two, I think Rangers will have appointed a new manager, but we don't know for a fact. The story that we know, as far as the media is concerned, is that Rangers are speaking to Steven Gerrard in London, and they're going to make a decision on it. If you had an influence, which I know you don't have, but if you did, when you could speak to the board, who would you suggest for being the next Rangers manager?
Well, he seems like a good fit. You know, I don't, at this stage of the season, obviously most of the really good managers are already employed by somebody.
Marino, a classic example.
So, you know, and McInnes, who would have been a candidate, is doing well with Hearts, probably the wrong time for him. So I cannot think off the top of my head who would be a better candidate than Gerrard. And I think the fans need a lift. You've never seen anybody so down. I've never seen a manager so, I don't think it's an exaggeration to say hated.
That was a point I made earlier. It wasn't. It's nothing like the Greg Moscow.
It's not,
much worse.
And even with the Belgian guy, I quite liked him. And, you know, ultimately, probably he had to go as well. But you never heard anybody calling him names.
And he came back to Ibrox and he got a
People were saying it's probably time for him to go. He did well when he came in. It's all faded a wee bit. But this was different. So they need a big lift. So maybe just on the basis that he won the league, the fans like him. And he kind of relates to West of Scotland people, doesn't he?
I think so. It's quite similar to Liverpool.
He's a bit like us. So, you know, he comes in, the players play bad, he gets angry. If you get a bad refereeing decision, he's raging. You know, he's
got a temperament, but he can be smart. He can adapt.
And in addition, he's still a legend in European football, isn't he? So if you were a player,
there's more chance a young player could, because we can't buy in the big market, but there's more chance a young player, like for, obviously we got the boy Moore, so that's not a good example because Russell Martin attracted him. But in general, a player's more likely to come to Rangers because of Gerrard, I would say, than somebody like Martin.
Well, look at Defoe. I mean, would Defoe have come to Rangers if Gerrard?
Well, he said they wouldn't have, so
So, you know, you'll get guys, just his contacts, you'll get guys. I mean, for years we've been bringing guys up for the English Championship. I mean, you can name it's actually
none of them are that great.
You know, they're off it a bit. He knows that. You know, he wouldn't make that mistake. And last time,
I think it'd be similar to the Walter Smith, that he'd be more experienced and a better manager.
And he's in a good bargaining position today because the Americans really, really need him today. So he can ask for anything, really, can't he? And they've got to give him it.
I would probably argue that this has been going on about 3 or 4 weeks, and they already knew his terms when they went to London. It's a case of what's your team, what your backroom staff, and it's going to be.
What I mean by that is he's not coming up here to manage that group of players, is he?
No.
You might need to put up with him for a while.
So he would have said that. So this is the question I've got to ask you, this one, right? I don't watch English football at all, ever. I've only ever watched one Premiership game in my life. You're a Rangers man, but I know you're an Arsenal man as well.
Aye.
How big do you think with Gerrard, if he does come to the club, with this Everton connection, do you think he'd be comfortable with that, or is that something that wouldn't matter?
I mean, down there, half their family are Everton, half them are Liverpool. I don't think
there's no the same kind of bitterness.
It's the same, and that's I don't know. I mean, I've only met the guy once, but he's kind of associated with Russell Martin, isn't he? So you wonder whether he can really survive it.
Well, what's your thoughts on the board then? The board done Kavanagh wrote the letter to the fans, which in my opinion, might be wrong, but in my opinion, he was basically saying, without saying it, that the Patrick Stewart and Thelwell have got this wrong, so we'll make the decisions just now.
Well, it looks, I hope somebody who knows what they're doing is making the decision, because it was really pretty difficult to understand why that guy even got an interview, on the basis of his
7 interviews
CV, it's astonishing. I was assuming, hoping for the best, that they knew what they were doing, and clearly there's no sign of that. He performed exactly as everybody thought he was going to perform, but so they can't make the same mistake again.
And also the backroom staff that you get, Gerrard will put winners in, I think. If he gets a job, he'll put winners in and recognise names. I can't think of any Russell Martin's squad of coaches and set piece experts, however, that were winners. There was nothing that made me think they were going to make Rangers winners.
No, it just seemed disorganised, and and then the players lose confidence because they're getting beat, and the fans turn
it became toxic. And then
so they need a big turnaround.
And then obviously Thelwell brings his son in. Again, that you get away with some stuff like that when you're top of the league and everything's going well. But when things are going right at Rangers, you can't bring in your son.
And the boy for Everton, that doesn't make any sense either, does it? So the centre forward.
Well, that's another thing, because I've touched on this on the Gers TV a lot. Every time people speak about Tony Andre Flo, they mention, was it 8 million he signed for? They mention that it was the biggest transfer fee in Scottish football. They never mention the fact that he was actually a great striker for us. Scored in all the big games, scored in Old Firm, comfortable player. But this boy, it's early stages, but I can't see Sharmati being the player that justifies the fee.
Well, maybe they're going to be incredibly lucky, but the point is, in football, you don't know how it's going to turn out. So if you sign a guy who scored 25 goals for 5 seasons and he never scores any in Scotland, at least you can say, well, look at his record before he came here.
That's why we put him.
And nobody's going to criticise you if it doesn't work out. If you sign somebody that's never scored a goal in 4 seasons for 7 million quid, when you've got tons of other areas in the team that need to be sorted out, I mean,
well,
how
also,
many fullbacks have they got?
As well as that, again, you might not agree with this, but Dessers, I thought, got a really hard time. They couldn't wait to get rid of Dessers, and they've replaced him with a guy who doesn't score.
It makes no sense whatsoever.
Iggy slightly different. Maybe he did have his heart in leaving, but I thought he was happy until Russell Martin came in. So that's a different one.
Well, I don't know, but they need a jolt. They need a shock. They can't.
That's why I think they'll go for Gerrard, because if they get Gerrard, there'll be thousands of Ibrox to welcome him. They'll be able to start selling tickets for the games again. The marketing, the shirts with Gerrard on it, the slogans he's got, the let's go and things like that. Other managers maybe won't give you that, and it gives the Americans a bit of credibility. That I thought they would have done all this in the first place when they brought in the first manager, but it gives them a second chance at the support.
I think that maybe my worry was they didn't really understand it up here.
They probably just started to learn it
up to now, but they'll have had a shock over the last month. At the depth of feeling about how badly things have gone, and maybe they'll learn from it. And definitely, it's an easy one. It's an easy appointment, isn't it? Because they know the fans want it.
That's what I'm saying.
If he wants it,
it ticks the boxes.
So in other words, if the fans hear that Gerrard was keen on it, and then they give it to somebody else, and it goes badly wrong again.
And the opposite part of that is they can turn around and say, "Well, the fans demanded change, and we gave the fans who they wanted. And the backroom staff, and they'll give them money."
So if he wants to do it, I don't have any doubt though. I mean, I'd heard they'd offered him it in the summer, and his personal reasons,
the tax reasons or whatever,
he didn't want to do it. So it makes perfect sense. He would be the first person they would offer it to. and he seems the feelers he's been putting out suggest he might be up for it. So I don't think things move on until they get to the end of that conversation. I think it's his job if he wants it.
I mean, I honestly think it'll be by Friday afternoon. Rangers will have announced it, because I think they need to have a new manager ready for the Dundee United game. We can't drop any more points. Tell us a wee bit about your life. You support Rangers, but you also have an Arsenal connection. How do you get into them?
Well, mainly because my dad used to buy all the books about Rangers history, and Arsenal were heavily involved in it.
I still argue that Rangers will get a bigger connection with Arsenal than they have any other club.
They bought shares in Woolwich Arsenal to help them when they were in financial trouble, and then when they moved across to the north of London, Arsenal gave Rangers shares, which Craig White then sold. You don't get me on that
story.
And then in 1973, they came to Ibrox for the centenary. Arsenal came and played at Ibrox, and then luckily enough, my sister, I've got two sisters. One of them ended up working in London for British Airways, so I used to get in to stay with her in London and go and see Arsenal. And I've just kept it up over the years. These days I tend to go to, was it Newcastle last year? I've been at Man United, Man City. I tend to go up north.
So you get quite a lot of their games in?
No, maybe once or twice a season. You know.
The other thing, just when you're talking about the connection here, so I might get this wrong, correct me if I do, but Bill Struth and
Herbert
Chapman were both the two managers of the biggest clubs in Britain. They were good friends.
They were.
And George Young and who would have been the captain of England at the time? Was it Locke?
I know the guy you're talking about. I can't just remember his name.
So this is the biggest names in British football, and they were all friends.
There
was a connection.
I've got pictures of them playing Struth, playing golf with Herbert Chapman and the guy who came after Chapman. But in the 30s, they played every season.
It was London and Glasgow.
And then they got it going again in the 60s.
The thing with Highbury would have been built by
the stands would
Archibald
have been built
Leach
by Leach. That's still there. They built flats in the stand. But they say, I'm on some of the Arsenal websites, there was a game at Highbury in, I think, 67, 68, and apparently it was just mayhem. It was riots everywhere.
Because at that point, part of London would have had an Irish connection. And Rangers were bonkers in the days.
And so Arsenal had to... It's a shame, actually, because, a lot of the Arsenal fans do like Rangers, but obviously there are people who like Celtic. So that's the kind of argument, how can you remember 1967? I'm thinking, Wendy was fighting in 1967 is probably in their 70s now.
But they probably still remember.
They do remember, to be fair. And, and everybody was, and then they'll say, there'll be other sites and they'll say, Arsenal went to Millwall and we took the Millwall end, and I'm thinking, it seems a bit double standards. They're kind of boasting that Arsenal had a mob that were causing a lot of trouble, but Rangers can't be forgiven. But I mean, I don't doubt Rangers did get in there because,
they were crazy days, to be fair.
But I mean, everybody was at it, wasn't it? It wasn't
that's what I'm saying about the football completely
and changed. Then in the 80s, there was a lot of Arsenal, a lot of Irish players. So a lot of the testimonial matches were Celtic. And so it kind of interrupted it in a way, and as a result, some of them are Celtic fans, but the ones that are right into Arsenal's history,
they would know
undoubtedly know about Rangers and the shares and the financial support and the games in the 30s and all that. So there is I went down one of my birthdays. We went down and did the museum, and there's a lot of Ranger stuff in the museum.
Right? So a question I'm going to ask you on this, because I really don't know the answer, but I've been told a few times by people that are smarter than me, it just can't be done. You mentioned the shares. It's no simple as just going and buying them back. That's gone, is that right?
Well, I think it might be a different company, but the problem was, they only had about 20 shares and they got about 200 grand for them, because Usinoff and the other guy were competing to get control of the club. So somebody buying shares.
Somebody with plenty of money says, I wanted to right this wrong. Could it be done? I don't think the original shares that Rangers had.
I just don't know if Arsenal are still the same company, because a lot of clubs have.
I can't remember what it was. A historian told me that it's not possible.
Might be, because when they did, I don't know whether when they built the Emirates, whether they changed, to a different limited company or something like that. That's probably it, because those shares that Craig White sold were issued about 1910 or 1920 or something like that,
And that was to protect Arsenal from going bust.
No, that was a kind of thank you gesture. So it was Woolwich Arsenal that Rangers.
Right.
So Rangers bought shares in Woolwich Arsenal to stop them going bust.
And they get a thank you.
And then when they became, I suppose it was a different club, but still called Arsenal. So when they were setting up a company structure, they gifted shares to Rangers to thank them for saving them getting out of business. Back in the,
I mean, it's a great story.
It is.
And Arsenal TV, Arsenal Fan TV, even done a full episode on it.
Actually, Woolwich Arsenal played Rangers about 1888 or something like that.
Right,
I think in Glasgow, actually. So they're in a long, long history with them. But, you know, to be honest, the other thing is it's so bitter up here. And then, you know, it's a wee bit different. You know, I watch Arsenal every game. I don't really get that upset about it. It's different.
That's how I don't get. I can't get an English game. It's not the same passion.
But I mean, I'm a big fan. I like going down and all that. But you can have a conversation with English Premier League fans about the football.
And I know why I stick
up here. It can all get a bit it can easily get quite bitter, can't it?
Aye, of course. So we're at the time. I'm going to try and do a 45-minute. We're on 41 minutes now, and that gets away for the football traffic. Next couple of months, Rangers are going to appoint a manager. First of all, who do you think it will be? Do you think it will be Gerrard?
I think it will be. Aye.
My opinion on this is he wouldn't listen to me, but if he could, I think his biggest criticism I've got of him is I think he disregarded the League and League Cup. This is a massive opportunity. Whoever comes in, he win the League Cup, win 2 games, beat Celtic, win the final, and all of a sudden you've got the fans behind you. Is that something you think that we should be going for, or do you think straight into the league?
Well, he's a winner, isn't he? He was a footballer. He was a winner, and you know when he came up here, the odds probably were stacked against him winning the league up here, weren't they? Because Celtic were so far ahead, but he did it. So he won't be getting into any game, you know, except in second prize. So he will. But the timing of it's great because if he was able to win it, it gets the fans back on side again, doesn't it?
Well, let me put it this way. This is the scenario I'm looking at. I don't gamble, so I've never been a bettor because I would get caught up in it too much. Gerrard's a favourite with the bookies just now, but they're suspended betting apparently because so much money's been put on it today. Right. So that usually tells you that something's going to happen quite quickly. If I was to be a betting man, I would make this prediction: Gerrard to come in, beat Celtic, get to the final, win the final, and Brendan Rodgers to have left again by January. Because I don't think Celtic and Rodgers' relationship's going to. They're going to maintain that. The fans, their fans are kind of went against it as well. But it's a good way for Rodgers to get out, and he's still classed as successful. Whereas he wouldn't want to be the manager if Gerrard won the league, which I still think is possible. But that's why they need a manager before the Dundee United game. They can't lose any more. They can't drop any more points up until at least January to the transfer window opens.
I wondered about that because they're talking already that Postecoglou might get sacked by Forest.
Would they come back up? I don't know. I don't know.
I mean, they took the Forest job, which, you know, when the fans loved the previous manager so much, it was a hard gig.
That was a poison chalice he took.
It was, and it's not worked out for him.
That would be interesting, but I think that the big one for me is Gerrard. I definitely think the Gerrard-Rodgers rivalry, I didn't think Rodgers was that comfortable with Gerrard.
And they were quite pally because they had him as the youth coach at Liverpool, didn't they?
When he came up to Ibrox, and that's how I think he was first approached. They played us in a friendly midweek.
And so was Bale. Bale was a big pal of Brendan.
Chelsea. What's your opinion on? Because I'll tell you my opinion first on it, and I think what the fans would be if Bale came back up as his assistant manager. See in a year's time, if Rangers were to win the league, nobody would care.
No,
I really don't think they would care. It's all right shouting about it on the internet. What's your opinion if he got the job as assistant?
I met him actually, and I thought he was a nice guy. And Gerrard was very, very complimentary about him. You know, he said, "Well, he get sent off at Parkhead, and I dealt with the disciplinary." And I wondered why, you know, they were getting.
This is the time he went up with the fans or something.
No, he gets sent. It was the day they beat Celtic 1-0 at Parkhead, and Morelos was right through 95, 96 minutes. And dived for some reason and get sent off.
Bale went
nuts because he thought he'd been fouled because he was standing at the dugout. And then he went over and had a go at the fourth official because it was 97 minutes and it only held up 4 minutes or something.
So what was your job to back him?
Well, he was just going up to get fined for it, but there was another thing, and I thought he was a decent guy, and I was asking, well, why are you getting me involved in this for one of the coaches? I was thinking, what difference does it make whether he's banned or not? And the word was, well, he's in charge of all the tactics.
So he was highly regarded. I mean, you could maybe argue if he never took the Rangers manager's job on, then the fans would be desperate for him to be back.
Because you can lose, as we just saw, you know, if you're coming out and just talking nonsense for 3 minutes, the fans turn off quite quickly, didn't they? I know, but Bill might have been good at organising the players. He wasn't a great communicator, was he? And I got in his head a wee bit.
It's back to what we're saying. He was a great or a good assistant manager, and that's probably the level. I would actually take him back, because I think if he was at that level and Rangers were successful, the fans wouldn't really care.
No, they'd forget about it.
Yeah, they would bring it up now and again, but they would be happy.
So you still get a house here, is it not?
He'll probably have friends and family up here still. The way it looks now, it looks like it's going to be the old band are back together.
Oh, they never took Bill, did they take him to Saudi?
No, but he offered him a job, I think, as far as I remember. I'm not sure of that. I know he took the kit man, but it also looks like Defoe coming as the coach, as like the striking coach. I think Defoe would be a good move.
They could do with a striking coach.
Aye, and maybe they'll get somebody like McGregor
I would play Defoe in front of the two of them.
Aye, well, the two that we don't, they're non-existent too. But I think that the coaching staff is a big part of this. I think he's got to get everything right. They've got to get the standards back. The expectations is a big thing for me.
Yeah.
And they've got to get the fitness back as well. Because Beale, if you remember, the last thing I'm going to mention, Gerrard he was accused of having the players too fit. And there was a reason behind it. They were saying that Rangers were on caffeine tablets that should have been illegal. In the 55 season, they were playing like robots and no human beings. That's when you know you're a good manager. There was a Celtic podcast basically saying that they were taking, the Rangers players looked to be taking illegal substances. Well, if you can't prove that, you can't see it.
Aye. Well, I don't know. I mean, you had them I think, did they go unbeaten this season? They won the...
Aye, they never won every game, but they were unbeaten, I'm sure.
I don't think they lost any,
in the league, but obviously they lost the two cups, but they had to win the league.
Aye. And I was at Hearts the day they got knocked out the Cup of Hearts, and I thought he might chuck it, Gerrard, I suppose that was his lowest point.
Aye.
And it poured with rain, we were in the front row, we get soaked, get knocked out. It was a Saturday night at 6 o'clock kickoff or something, miserable. And I thought he might just chuck it after this. And he didn't, stuck with it and won the league. So, interesting. It certainly get everybody's chins up a bit. And I think it would help the players, because I think the players are struggling with the pressure at the moment, especially the new ones. And
the thing that I've spoken about a few times on my show is the players, do you think they're not as bad as they look just now?
I'm worried that they are every bit as bad as they look.
Well, that is a problem then.
And that Mourinho couldn't get a game at them, but I'm maybe been a bit unfair. They've been under the cosh. He's played a different team every week, different formation every week. It's been a shambles.
Aye.
I don't think he knew what his best team was. And, so how could you ever really get in any kind of groove when you're playing 1 week, drop to next week on the bench, and then put you in a different position?
Well, whoever gets the job's going to have a better defence, because Sterling's going to be back in a couple of weeks. Sterling never even played under Russell Martin, so it's almost as if he wasn't there.
He tends to play about 3 games in a row.
And that's the unfortunate part. We need to get players fit, and we need to get them regular football again. But it's been a pleasure to have you on.
Yeah.
Thanks for your contribution. And it looks like you've got a friend forever with the dog.
I hope so.
Thank you very much. Cheers.
Bye-bye.